I'm Joe Johnson, and I'm the set designer for Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie, directed by Alvin. And I'm going to take you a little bit on the process that I went through as the set designer for this show, so I hope you enjoy. One of the key aspects to the genesis of the design and the idea was that it was going to be told from the perspective of a Chinese immigrant family set in the late 1930s in the St. Louis tenement home. We went through many iterations early on based on research with maybe large fabrics or fragmented buildings to display memory, but there was always the key aspect of the fire escape, and that is important to the text and the story, as well as to our telling of this story. So with the fire escape, there was this idea that Tom, through his memory, he must descend into the dark recesses of his mind to retell this tale. And Tom, after he left his family, it was all this, imagery that we pulled that, he was out at sea, that he was free, and that every night, he would see the moon, and that would sort of spark the memory of him, in that tenement home and having to now retell the story that we see, and remembering the sort of deafening deed that he had done. After we gathered research, I created this collage based off of the research, and we were drawn to, and it was great because Alvin took this image and then he folded it in half, and suddenly we had this verticality that became exciting for us, and it was reminiscent of the shape of like Chinese scrolls, and that became a really exciting element based off of this collage that really drove us through the process to the finished design. And then there was this red Chinese teapot. He remembers only certain elements because we asked, what is memory and what would he remember? So he only remembers certain elements of that home that really stuck out to him. And primarily the dining table, the couch, and then the menagerie. And those elements were really critical in getting to the crux of the design and this very psychological space which we came up with. And so by having these much more sparse elements, it becomes far more essential to this memory that he is retelling. But these little elements that stand out then really do pop, and then especially when Drina's costume designs, especially in the final scene, the dinner sequence, having Amanda in this amazing red dress, Chinese inspired dress, it really helps then to really tell that psychological element that Tom is remembering. This is the most important part of the memory for him, is this final moment. It's the most clear in his memory, and having those elements then really stand out against this very dark void, with the fire escape in the background, really do make the telling of our story, I think, very concrete and exciting. So a little bit more about like the fire escape. It really became a physical manifestation of Tom's mind, a place he goes to find comfort, a taste of freedom, a little pocket for himself. Alvin and I came up with this term called cold comfort. Where do we retreat to when we need that space? And the fire escape led him to the movies, led him to be away from his overbearing mother and controlling Chinese maybe way about her that Tom, as a mixed Asian American child, just doesn't want to be associated with. The fire escape is both the past and present of where Tom is currently. Having this upper portion have this sort of wet, maybe moist feeling, and then descends into a much drier place when we go into the home. really does capture itself quite beautifully, I think, with the moonlight that Brian so brilliantly lit. It really makes Tom have this feeling that he's out at sea. And then someone had told us, or I think I told Alvin, that in the model photos that this person saw beforehand, that the fire escape had this imagery or sense of a ship. And that was really exciting to hear, because that meant that, you know, all this talk about where Tom was and what he was doing then really resonated and came through in the design. So thank you for listening in, and I hope you enjoy Alvin's virtual production of the Glass Menagerie. And with this imagery in mind, you can hear it and then see it together in a very unique and different way.
Hi, I'm Drina Krlic, a costume designer for the Glass Menagerie. So the very starting point of my design process was really understanding a specific way this play resonates with our director, Alvin Zhang. So from the beginning, we talked about how important it is to him to have the Glass Menagerie with a Chinese immigrant family. And that part, of course, significantly influenced the design approach. In order to truly follow this idea, it was important to discover all the layers of how this affects the development of each of the characters throughout the play, so we can really define a relevant costume journey for each of them. Another important element for the design process was the fact that this is a memory play. And as the writer states in the preface, memory takes a lot of poetic license. It omits some details while others are exaggerated. So the world on stage is actually the interior of Tom's memory and his emotions towards this memory. And this space is inhabited by the obstructive psychology of his family members. So it was very important to establish a vocabulary of what is in Tom's mind and how he feels about them, how he remembers them, and also what he distilled about them from that memory. At that point in the process, I started with just thinking about how memory really works, and how we sometimes precisely remember the things that have some meaning to us while forgetting those that don't. Having that in mind, I envisioned the costumes that visually support the way the memory works and the way we record the images in our mind and show the most prominent sides of the characters that had an emotional impact on Tom. So the general idea was to put the accent on Tom's freshest and most painful memory. Something that is very present throughout the whole play is Tom's relationship with his sister. What he feels and describes is an empathy with Laura's pain and discomfort in the world. And that is exactly what I wanted to outline with her costume. The way her body moves on stage along with the costume should reflect on her fragility and delicacy. Amanda Wingfield is a demanding mother who creates tension in the family. She's trying to control everything, and she conveys her frustration to her children. Therefore, her costume should look strict and very neat to show her obsession with the external perfection, but as the show progresses, to also indicate the loss of her credibility in Tom's eyes. So for the dinner scene, we wanted the audience to feel discomfort with the pretentious way Tom's mother is dressed. So we used a bold color and a very flamboyant headpiece, obviously from her youth, because we wanted her to look a little bit scary and ridiculous at the same time. Since her aim is to marry her daughter to this American guy, she puts all her family wealth on display. Material wealth is shown with the multiple jewelry sets, and by making this decision to have Amanda and Laura in the traditional Chinese dresses, we wanted to show that Amanda also parades with the cultural wealth as well. Tom's costume should portray an internal struggle of a character haunted by the memory and torn between the urge to escape the monotony, anxiety, and powerlessness, and on the other side, the feeling of responsibility to his dysfunctional family. At the beginning of the play, when he invites us into the story, we see him on the fire escape wearing a merchant marine uniform. He looks very well put together. But the moment he steps inside the house, that all starts to gradually fall apart until we see him in an unbuttoned shirt and in an overall messy appearance. Jim O'Connor, as someone who was very popular in high school and now is devoted to personal success, is in a sharp contrast with the delicate and vulnerable Wingfield family. His character represents the outside world, the world of reality, the material world. In one of the conversations with the team, we came up with the term fresh soap, which pretty much explains what we wanted to achieve with Jim's costume. It should reflect a sleek, sporty, kind of modern guy. The term Glass Menagerie is used for collections of porcelain and glass figurines of animals, but as a metaphor, it is used for any ineffective, useless, and basically unnecessary group of people. For that reason, I used the same color palette for all the characters. Also, the white, beige, and ivory tones were used with an aim to visually unify them and allude to a haunting, cyclic, obstructive nature of a dysfunctional and mentally fragile family. Thank you for watching.
Hello, my name is Brian Jordan, and I am the lighting designer for Northwestern University's production of The Glass Menagerie, directed by Alvin. I've loved this play since I read it in high school. I even used the monologue where Tom finally snaps at Amanda for a few of my college auditions in undergrad. The story feels so relatable to me. A young man is caught between following his dreams and taking care of his family. He can't do both when following his heart means he has to leave behind his mother and sister. I feel everyone has gone through that feeling of being torn between two forces, with no choice but to choose one over the other. I enjoyed working with Alvin on this production because his story is similar. He wanted to follow his dream of being in theater, but it meant he had to leave his family behind and step away from his role as the eldest son, the one who ought to stay behind and take care of his family in their old age. It can't be easy being the eldest son of a single mother. I believe there's a sense of responsibility involuntarily thrust upon you. Tom didn't ask to step into the man of the house role. He doesn't want to be the breadwinner of the family. He has dreams and aspirations that don't include staying in a tiny apartment with a mother who critiques his every mistake and vice. He feels trapped and has to fight his way to freedom, even if that means leaving his mother and sister behind. Playwright Tennessee Williams is Tom, and this is a true story. He did have a sister that wore a leg brace, and ultimately underwent a lobotomy at the behest of his mother. He did leave his family behind to follow his dreams and find adventure. And he did have some regrets about what he did in his past. I don't know if this play is his way to do things differently, or a way to come to peace with and accept the decisions and mistakes he made in the past. Creating this memory play, he is allowed to travel back in time and relive those moments again. For this production, our team wanted to create the two worlds depicted in the text. The present, where Tom is retelling his story to the audience, and the past through the memories he shows. The present day is cold and sharp to show the outcome of his decisions, provoke Tom to think back to his time in St. Louis, and create a base atmosphere that can juxtapose the warm and soft nature of the memory when Tom steps away as the narrator and assumes his role as a character in the memory. The use of the fire escape scenic element helps with these shifts. The narrations Tom gives to the audience in the present day take place on that fire escape platform, but I wanted another facet to further signify those shifts. The memory is soft and warm to create a vintage photo look, as well as feel reminiscent and familiar. I believe Tom makes this memory look and feel softer and warmer than the reality of the past because he has regrets about the decisions he's made. Even though the events of those memories include fights with his mother and the rising tensions leading up to his exit of the apartment, Tom wants to remember the past as warmer and more inviting than it actually was. The lighting design is minimalistic, with the upstage fire escape being lit with cool and warm lights to take part in both the present and the past, and the downstage apartment only living in that soft, warm lighting. During my research, I was drawn to shafts of light and shadows creating texture. This led me to become interested in the ability for the fire escape to cast shadows into the apartment, to create an intrusion into the space and add this texture, but also create the feeling of Tom never really existing to one world or the other. He must be in both worlds simultaneously. How deep into the apartment the shadow of the fire escape intrudes corresponds with how deep into the memory Tom goes. It isn't necessarily a tether keeping him connected to the present, but more of a path leading him back out of his mind if it ever becomes too difficult for him to relive these moments. Before stepping into the theater, I was worried about always seeing the fire escape and the relative difficulty to make it disappear or blend into the rest of the frame. I didn't want all the focus to be about the big fire escape upstage, but as I was designing in the space, I found comfort in the constant visual of the fire escape and the various ways I could light different areas of it and create different compositions of texture with the vertical pipes and horizontal platform. Because elements in the apartment didn't move, I honed in on directing focus when lighting it, brightening the areas where the scenes were taking place, while also keeping the rest of the apartment in a dimmer lighting in the visual frame of the space. As a memory, some moments become exaggerated, particularly the moments of Tom reminiscing about the fun and adventure across the alley, and the scene with Jim and Laura. These moments introduce blue, pink, and magenta colors into the lighting to further heighten the moment and give it that added weight and excitement. These for me serve as the two forces that push and pull Tom in the past. His excitement of the world beyond the four walls he's found himself trapped in, and the excitement and life of his sister he doesn't want to leave behind. I love the ending of this play, both for the closure it brings to Tom, as well as the challenge it poses the audience. To cherish the moments you have with those you love, while also follow your dreams. There is no perfect scenario in this play, as there is no perfect scenario in life. Sacrifices have to be made to truly be happy. Coming to peace with what you give up for the multitude of things you will gain differs from person to person. I gave up my hometown and seeing the friends that I made there to move to Chicago and pursue my dreams. Yes, there are days that I miss it, but the life I'm making now is so richer and more fulfilling than the life I would have if I had stayed. I believe Tennessee Williams felt the same way. It's tough to leave behind things you hold dear, but not making that leap would have hurt even more. I hope you enjoyed this look behind the scenes of the Glass Menagerie, and I hope you enjoy the show.